It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. I'll tell you, wee hours in the morning, they got it done. They got the big $3.5 trillion infrastructure plan rolling down the road. Long way to get it done, but first obstacle overcome, and good for them. Something we need. In fact, to be honest, even Mitch McConnell was kind of, in his own really kind of creepy way, praising the president for getting that bipartisan bill pushed through. And on another side of way, you got to give Biden credit for keeping the cats herded together. The Democrats were all on the same page. They all almost look like a political party, and good for them. Might mean we might get something done. Might mean that we might get some rebuilt stuff. Maybe we'll get some investments in the future. Maybe my internet won't be terrible. Maybe I won't have to pay through the nose for it. Maybe a lot of stuff. Going to be an interesting next couple of months, but I'm a little more optimistic than I was, say, yesterday. Look, there's a long road in this, and enough room for Democrats to do what they do and convene the circular firing squad. But I'm hopeful, because we need this. I mean, that's the thing. We need massive investment, and we've needed it for, a couple of decades now. And this is one of those things that, you look at the polling, and the reason why 69 Republicans or 69, senators and 19 Republicans voted for the infrastructure plan. People want it. People know we need it. It's been way too long since we've had a really big investment in this country. And this is historic numbers. I mean, this is, right up there with Eisenhower, building the interstate highway system. This is the future of the country we're talking about. This is what we're leaving to our children and our grandchildren. This is the legacy. This is the opportunity to leave something better. And I know so many people, no, because it'll give the Democrats a win. Think about your children. Be a good Republican, radical self-interest. This is going to help the country. It's going to help your kids down the road. Something we absolutely need to do. And I'm thrilled we're at least moving in the right direction. Still, long way to go, but we might get there. And this comes, again, organizing, coming together, pushing, calling your representatives, doing that stuff, all kinds of good opportunities there. Now, the other side, right now the Republican Party has lost its ever-loving freaking mind. You look at states across the country, you look at New Jersey, Wisconsin, Colorado, freaking Tennessee. Wow. States all over the place of entitled, angry white Tea Party spawn led by zombie Karens, screaming and crying and invoking the name of Jesus because somebody has the audacity on a school board to care if their kids are safe, to care if their kids and other people's kids, my kids, your kids, anyone. Isn't that the job of the school board? So all of the crazy Karens, the zombie Karens out with their mania, screaming, it's my right. And the weird thing is I hear this all the time. I hear people on the right all the time yelling, it's my right. It's my right. I have the right not to wear a mask. I have the right to whatever. But you never hear one of them ever say anything about responsibility. And this is the weird part of this, because the Republican Party used to at least try and claim to be the party of personal responsibility. Now, I would argue they never really were, but they at least tried, put on the facade, tried. made it look like maybe they were the party of responsibility. But you look at this stuff, it is crazy. Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, tweeted out, quote, any school district, public university, or local government that decides to defy GA 38, which prohibits government and entities from mandating masks, you will be taken to court. The path forward relies on personal responsibility, not government mandates. Now, he's against mandates, right? Except he's mandating that you can't require masks. He's mandating that if you do have the audacity to say, in our little place, going to sue you, going to use the power of big government. Whatever happened to the conservative movement? What happened to them? What happened to conservative principles of smaller, less intrusive local government? What happened? Where did the party go? Where did the party of sainted Ronnie Reagan go? Get government out of our lives. This is what they believe. Now, I do find it interesting that they're going to crush the decision of a lower government body that they claim to so believe in by using the bigger one. I guess it matters only to them. Now, look, I'm somebody who believes the federal government has a role in certain things. So ideologically speaking, I'm right on the same page. I haven't changed. And that's the weird thing about being a Republican. It's interesting how you have to, as time goes on, you have to go back and apologize for all the things you were wrong about. I mean, go back to the civil rights era when you had all of the current Republican mindsets out there who voted against the civil rights bill. As a liberal, as a working class liberal, I am on the right side of it. I don't have to apologize. Much like these mask mandates. In 6 months, if things get completely blown out of hand because of these people, I'm still going to be where I was. We should be mandating people to wear masks, especially the unvaccinated. It just makes sense. And so you're looking across the country at all these school board meetings. And look, you've got these zombie Karens coming out with their angry rhetoric, basically the illegitimate spawn of the Tea Party movement. And, angry, got their signs, they put a lot of energy. They've got a lot of vested interest in this. They've taken a lot of their own mindset and put into this because no one's going to tell my kid that they have to be safe. And the weird thing here is, and I go, look, as someone who, my kids are going to be wearing masks when they go back to school because I don't want them to get sick. We're going to get them vaccinated. One is in the process. We're going to get them what they need, but we're going to keep them safe. And this idea that you should have some right to make everybody else miserable is insane. Just insane. And the weird thing is I'm looking at these, if you're watching these videos, it's incredible. You watch the sense of entitlement, this anger that on some level they believe that only their opinion matters. And that they, the loudest, the grievance crowd, that only they matter. And they will threaten and they will intimidate and they will do everything in their power to harass and do what they look at these videos. It's insane. These people had children. And the weird thing is, this is the most amazing part to me. Do you know who you hear not complaining? The children. Most of the kids that I see, they seem to get it. My kids claim that when they were going back to school, the kids weren't upset. They knew what they had to do, and they went through it. It's these zombie Karens who I don't know what rationale is, but we're not going to get my kids vaccinated. You're not going to make them wear a mask. It's like they want them to get sick and die. It's like they want some kind of, what's that thing, Munchausen by proxy? Maybe these are those people. But they're not going to be the ones who deliberately get the kids sick. They're going to set it up so they get sick. I mean, it's bizarre. And I hope someone is keeping a list, keeping a running tally of all of these zombie Karens who show up at these board meetings and crying about how their precious babies shouldn't be forced to wear that onerous mask and how the smell of their own breath is going to knock them unconscious. It's insane. And, I always joke that, you need a license in this country to get a dog, but apparently any moron can have a kid. And they seem to be the most entitled, the loudest, and the wrongest. And this is the weird thing where I'm at, because look, I don't want any of these children to get sick, because it's not their fault. It's not their fault they were born to morons. I mean, I don't know how much easier to put that. Putting on a mask, honestly, I hate it as much as anyone. You can ask my wife. I freaking hate it. But if it means keeping somebody else okay, you do it. It's not that big of a deal. And this whole nonsensical argument of, oh, that mask on your face, it's going to deprive your brain of oxygen. If your brain is that fragile, which evidently these zombie Karens' brains are that fragile, maybe you should do something else. You have choice. Do you remember that? Remember that whole school choice thing? You don't want your kids to wear a mask? You have the choice to keep them at home. You have the choice to educate them yourself. You have the choice to send them to a crazy fanatic school. I'm sure the crazy religious schools would love to have them. We can indoctrinate them so that they can go, well, we don't need vaccinations. We're doused in the blood of Jesus. I mean, when someone says that out loud, it literally stops me in my tracks. But I've heard it so many times. It's insane. Now, the good thing is there are school districts across this country that are going, no. Be as loud and as obnoxious as you want to be. We're going to do our job and we're going to protect our children. You have the ability, and I talked about this the other day, the school district I'm in sent out a letter, said, hey, this is what we're doing. We've decided mask mandates, social distancing, hand washing, all that stuff. No lockers. You're going to have to carry everything with you. Sorry, this is just how it is. If you don't, basically in a very nice way, they went on to say, if you don't like it, there's the cyber charter. There's the virtual academy thing. You can choose that. That is your choice. This is the choice. Come to school, abide by the rules, wear the damn mask that everybody hates, and I admit that. Or keep your kids at home and have your own little petri dish of insanity. And there you go. There's your choice. Simple. Speaking of choice, I did get a kick out of the teacher in Virginia. Evidently, they had the Loudoun County Public School Board had their meeting in Northern Virginia. And hundreds of people there, mask mandates, crazy, all kinds of stuff. One teacher, very angry that they were going to have to call a transgender student by whatever name the child put down on the paper. That's who they are. Whoever the parents say that kid's name is, that's what that kid's name is. This woman so incensed that she was going to have to call formerly Johnny Susie now. She lost her mind. She quit her job. And I said, good, bye. That's what has to happen at this point. She against it, and that's her right. Time to move along. She made her choice. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that argument. Now, I get this from people all the time. Well, school should allow parents to make that choice. I just told you the choice. Come to school, wear the mask, or stay home. Those are your choices. It's the same thing in the workplace. Do what's mandated by the employer, or go home. In fact, San Francisco reported, the AP reported out of San Francisco, California going to be the first state in the nation to require all teachers be vaccinated or tested weekly. Here in our state, Governor Tom Wolf, he has announced that our state, all Pennsylvania employees in the state health care facilities and in the high-risk care facilities, they are going to be required to be vaccinated by September 7th, or they're going to have to undergo weekly testing and all of the things that go along with that. Also, the mayor of D.C., they have said all 37,000 city employees and contractors who work in the city, they're going to have to be vaccinated by September 19th. So it's coming. It's coming. If you weren't smart enough to get it early enough and voluntarily help yourself, the choice is going to be yours. You have the choice. You can say no and go home. The other part of this for me is I'm of the mindset that as someone who pays really high insurance premium payments, a lot of money I pay for healthcare, that if now in this moment you knew there was a way to protect yourself and you chose not to, at some point the insurance company is going to have to say, you're on your own. We've done everything we can do to get you to do what you need to do. If you get it, and you end up in the ICU and all of this stuff, we're taking everything. And I think that's, at some point, this is where it has to go. And I know, doused in the blood of Jesus. But unlike the guy, that Jim Baker, selling his miracle blankets, that he believes you just put all your bills under the miracle blanket and somehow they all get paid. That's not the real world. And I know a lot of my religious friends like to think that the tooth fairy is going to come and take care of all their bills. Not going to happen. Not going to happen. Love to hear your thoughts, though. Where's your school? What's your school district doing? Are they moving forward on a mask mandate? Are they going to leave it optional so that they make sure that the kids who are doing the right thing are exposed to people who aren't? You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. This is a hot topic, but at the end of the day, being part of a society, this is part of it. This is part of it. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, our good friend, former Illinois Congressman and presidential candidate Joe Walsh, going to be here to share some thoughts on the mask mandates and everything above. Right back. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1937. That was the day the International Longshoremen's and Warehousemen's Union was founded, after the victorious strike of 1934 that established the Union Hiring Hall. West Coast Union leaders embarked on an inland campaign to organize the thousands of warehouse workers who handled shipped goods. But West Coast dock workers overwhelmingly chose to join the CIO after it was expelled from the AFL earlier that year. They found that the ILA planned to abandon the warehouse workers they had worked so hard to organize. They also opposed dues assessments to fight the CIO and disagreed with the ILA's hostility to minimum wage laws, Social Security, and unemployment insurance. Radicals like Harry Bridges and others had established themselves not only as workers' leaders, but also led attacks on Jim Crow racism in the ranks and in the industry. The success of the 1934 strike was due in part to the welcoming of blacks into the ranks of the Union. In his book, Workers on the Waterfront, historian Bruce Nelson notes that, quote, the ILWU's well-known opposition to racial discrimination was an important factor in the Union's expansion into Hawaii, not only on the waterfront, but among sugar and pineapple plantation workers. The triumph of the ILWU in Hawaiian agriculture brought about a degree of fraternization across racial lines that few had thought possible. Since then, the Union has beat back numerous Taft-Hartley and McCarthy-era attacks. More recently, the ILWU has has been in the forefront of broader social justice struggles, leading walkouts and work stoppages for various political causes. Today, it represents close to 60,000 workers, including those locals that initially refused to affiliate. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So as I said, I fear that the zombie Karen movement, the illegitimate spawn of the Tea Party, when this craziness going on in these school boards is going to screw up my fall. I got a trip planned in October to Alaska, and they better not screw this up. Just my thoughts. Anyway, welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. But look, these school board meetings are just nuts. And, as I said before, you need a license to get a dog. Evidently, anyone can have a kid. And here to share some thoughts on, just how bad it is, I've asked our good friend, former Illinois Congressman Joe Walsh, to come talk with us. Joe's also the host of the F Silence podcast. You can check that out at fsilencepodcast.com. Joe, thanks for taking time for us.
Hello, my little brother. Good to be with you, Rick.
What do you think of this? What do you make of all of this? For me, it's reminiscent of the Tea Party, only crazier. You got all these Karens out there whining about, I don't want my precious baby wearing a mask and it's bad for their breath, or who knows what the latest argument is. But boy, they're angry.
Well, why do you have to bring everything back to the Tea Party? You cut it out. Totally different thing.
Same kind of crazy.
The Tea Party wasn't crazy, Rick. We were all about cutting the size of government and doing something about debt and deficits. That's a legit concern. Look, I'm all about local control. I don't like governors mandating either way. Let local school boards and local school districts decide how to handle mask policy.
Yeah, I mean, at some point, though, you look at this and common sense has to play into this. We know that the only real tools we have are people getting vaccinated. And if you're not going to do that, you got to wear the mask. You got to socially distance. Or we're not getting through this, and this is going to continue cyclic for who knows how long.
I agree with that. And I do agree that on my right, you tend to find a disproportionate amount of people who are conspiracy driven and they're anti-vax. I will tell you, Rick, and this may please you and your audience, I speak to these folks every day. I'm getting much less resistance, and I try to encourage them every day to get vaccinated. I'm getting less resistance now than I did a month or two ago. So something is changing.
Yeah, people are dying. And look, this may make you very happy. There are kooks on the left who are anti-vaxxers as well.
Yes.
And this is not one party or the other. It just seems right now the largest segment is on your side of the aisle.
It's white Republican men. It's white Republican men who listen to Tucker Carlson every night tell them not to get vaccinated. That's our biggest problem group. That's the group I try to speak to every single day. And there's still resistance, but it's breaking down a little bit. Maybe, as you say, Rick, because of fear. I mean, people are dying.
Now, what do you think? You're against, obviously, you're going to be against government mandates. Like our governor here in Pennsylvania said, look, if you work in a nursing home or a critical care facility, you're going to have to be vaccinated or you're going to be tested weekly, and we're going to monitor everything you do to keep our patients safe. I guess you would be against that?
No, I have no problem with government mandating people working in the government, like teachers, public school teachers. I have no problem with the government telling public school teachers to get mandated, masked, vaccinated, telling people in the military, ordering them to get vaccinated. I have no problem, Rick, with private industry, employers doing whatever they want to make sure their employees are vaccinated. I have no problem with the private sector restaurants not letting anybody into their restaurant if they're not vaccinated.
Yeah, and on the other side, I guess you'd be okay with them, like the guy, what was it, in St. Louis, who was saying if you are vaccinated, you can't come in, and we're not going to give you a ride in the cab. Just craziness. You'd be in favor of that too, right?
Well, hey, Rick, I have no problem with that either.
I don't either.
And that would be a restaurant that you and I would never set foot in.
Correct. No, and I'm okay with that. And I wish it were that simple sometimes. I do want to get your thoughts also on the big infrastructure bill. $1.2 trillion bipartisan deal so far looks pretty good, like it might happen. They moved a little bit forward on the $3.5 trillion deal. Would you have voted for either one of those?
I would have voted for the first one. Roads, rail, bridges, broadband, basic real infrastructure. My God, Rick, I was in Congress 10 years ago and we were talking about infrastructure. The roads, you know this better than I do. The roads and bridges in this country are falling apart. This is one area where generally Republicans and Democrats, and by the way, Rick, almost every Republican in Congress that I talk to privately, they support privately this $1.2 trillion basic infrastructure deal. Most of the guys in the House won't vote for it because of Trump in the base. But yeah, this is something we need.
And as you've said, it was a decade ago that you were in Congress, and we didn't get anything then. And I said the other day that the I-35 bridge collapsed 14 years ago. And we were talking about, hey, we need to do something, now, and still haven't. I mean, we're still waiting for tragedy to happen before we act on anything. And I think this is a good thing.
And Rick, Trump is such an incompetent idiot, right? Mr. Real Estate, Mr. Builder. He couldn't even get in a basic infrastructure bill passed. That would have been a very easy thing for him to do. Good on Joe Biden. By the way, a lesson to Democrats here, especially Democrats on the left. Joe Biden was right on some things. I mean, he worked behind the scenes on this infrastructure bill. You can get bipartisanship.
No, and look, that's, his years there, that's what he was able to do. And I hope that gets through. Now, I'm sure where we will disagree is in the $3.5 trillion spending. I think we desperately need some of the spending that's in there. I'm sure there's some things that we can disagree on. But I think we need that kind of massive investment to reshore up our social safety net and also help people through this pandemic.
I don't. That's where you and I would separate. That's way too much money. Look, and again, both parties, Rick, have been doing this. This is a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic, and we've just been shoveling money out the door. I would argue not very efficiently. And I think you might agree with me that way too much of the money we've shoveled out the door, especially last year under Trump, went to big business and big corporations instead of small mom and pop shops. I look at this, continuing the moratorium on evictions. I mean, there are a lot of mom and pop landlords out there, Rick, who are dying right now as well. So I mean, eventually we got to stop.
No, I'm with you. At some point you've got to stop, but you also have to make investments. And I go back to 100 years ago when I took Econ 101. There's good debt and there's bad debt. There's bad debt where you go back to what we did during that tax cut bill. We overwhelmingly made Mike Bloomberg and the billionaires wealthier, while it didn't help much of the working class. That's bad debt. Good debt is investing in an infrastructure that's going to help take care of our senior citizens, help people get an education, help do some of the things that your generation and mine kind of took for granted. I mean, I'm looking at college costs as just an incredible burden on working class families. And I believe that is part of infrastructure. It's part of the human infrastructure that we need in this country to compete globally. And if we don't do something about it, we're going to continue to fall behind.
Two things, Rick. Nobody ever talks about the debt. And nobody cares about the debt.
I do. I talk about it.
Brother, I love you, but I don't know that you do. I know the Democratic Party doesn't. I know the Republican Party doesn't. You and I will be long, long gone before anybody addresses any of this debt. The second thing, you talk about how expensive college is. The reason college is so expensive is because government is already and has been so involved in government loans for so long. That's why tuition's so expensive, and this will only continue.
Yeah, the difference is you go back into the 50s and 60s, we didn't give out loans, they funded universities. Tax dollars went to funding these universities. There was no benevolent benefactor going, here, we're going to give you money. It was government dollars. So instead of forcing kids to take out student loans, I'm simply saying return to the days when my grandparents' generation built an education system that made it possible for people to go to college without a lifetime of debt. Here in the state of Pennsylvania, we have a state system of higher education. Back in the 80s when I was going to school, the state picked up about 2/3 of the cost of tuition. The students picked up about 1/3. Today, that number is almost over 3/4 of the tuition is being paid by the students, and the state has walked away. There's a problem here. It's because we've given too many tax breaks away and too many tax cuts to corporations and the very wealthy, and we're not funding this stuff anymore.
We have the best university system in the world.
I agree.
We've reached a point, Rick, I think you would agree, where not everybody needs to go to college.
Absolutely
Your
agree.
generation and my generation, that was the thought. You had to go to college to be a success. But again, I tell you, if you're a college president and you know that the government of the United States of America is bankrolling and backstopping every student loan, you are going to continue to raise tuition to an astronomical level, and that's what they've done. The government's guaranteeing it, and now we're talking about forgiving student loans. Come on.
Yeah, I've said that I'm not in favor of forgiving them entirely. I think you should pay them back at the kind of interest rates that we can borrow money from right
True.
now. So if you took out a $100,000 loan, you pay 0.01% interest, and you pay back $101,000 over the life of the loan. I think that's fair. But this idea that they're paying 7-8% and just being killed by the interest and penalties and all kinds of stuff is just insane. But that's a whole nother thing. So let me ask you. I mean, you've done this. You were in Congress for a while. What do you think the chances of getting each of the bills through, and do you think there's any chance both get through?
I think there's a decent chance both get through. I don't know what you think, but I think Nancy Pelosi, the speaker, is pretty insistent upon getting both through. And if she toes that line, Rick, I think the Democrats believe, again, this isn't where I am, but the Democrats believe they have a moment in time right now. History tells us the Republicans are going to take over the House next year. Redistricting tells us that. I think Biden and Pelosi believe we got to go for it now and get what we can get now. I think there's a decent chance both will get through.
Yeah, I'm of the mindset that I think it's possible both get through because I think Pelosi understands if they're not going to just be able to move the bipartisan bill because you're going to have the left say, no, we're not passing that, and it'll die. I fear, and my greatest fear is we get nothing. We're looking in October and nothing gets done.
Do you think, Rick, Pelosi, at the end of the day, if she had no choice, she wouldn't put forth the bipartisan bill?
Oh, I think she would, but I think you're going to have enough people.
Alone.
And I think I don't know if you have enough Democrats, enough Republicans to come over to bail out the number of Democrats that would leave.
You don't think every Democrat would support that, even if it's standalone?
From what I'm hearing,
Yeah.
Because it's such a razor close margin. You lose a handful. I'm hoping I'm wrong.
They need it. I'll tell you what, again, if I were advising Democrats, Rick, I would say this. The Republicans have nothing to run on except a bunch of culture war bullshit, pardon me, and going after masks and vaccinations. If Joe Biden and the Democrats next year can run on even this bipartisan infrastructure bill, something the American people care about, that would help them keep control of the House.
Yeah, before I let you go, I wanted to get your thoughts. Over the weekend, you had the former acting Attorney General testify in front of Dick Durbin in the secret committee. Thoughts coming out of that?
Why the hell? I mean, why the damn hell, Rick, is there not a freaking criminal investigation of Donald Trump? It is clear. It was clear to you and me a while ago. The former president of the United States attempted a coup. Period. Every day we learn more and more. Why the hell is there not a criminal investigation?
And
I don't understand it.
I don't either, and I don't know why they went home. We should have had hearings. This should be pressed 24/7 right now.
But Rick, I'm pulling my hair out. Forget about hearings. The Justice Department right now should be criminally investigating Donald Trump for using the powers of his office to overturn an American election.
Do you think he's going to be held accountable? I said from the beginning, and in fact, I said on January 7th, there's no way he's going to be convicted or tried. We don't do that in this country. Do you think he's going to be held accountable?
No, I don't. And I think he'll be the Republican nominee in 24. And hello, he's got a decent chance of being president again. Take that, Rick Smith. I'm tired of you.
No, sadly, I agree with you, and that's what scares me.
No, I don't. I don't see the Democrats have the balls to do what they need to do. And I do not believe this Justice Department has the balls to go after a former president who attempted a coup in these United States. And because of that, I think Trump's going to walk.
So you don't see the Georgia thing. You don't see the Manhattan DA. You don't see any of that.
No, I think he might get nickeled and dimed on some of his personal financial stuff, some civil stuff maybe. But my God, I mean, criminally trying to overturn an American election. Maybe, Rick, maybe. I think we know about it. The Justice Department is doing something and we don't know about it. But I don't think they are.
I don't think they are either. I don't see Merrick Garland as that. They did nothing with the Mueller report. As Mueller said here, you do this. I don't think they're going to do anything with this. And that's what's frustrating to me, because we should be holding people accountable. We didn't do anything to Reagan after Iran-Contra. We didn't do anything to George W. Bush over getting into Iraq and the aluminum tubes. We're not going to do anything on this either. And the sad reality is there's half the country who doesn't see anything wrong with what he did.
And Rick, you're going to normalize this. Again, respectfully, this isn't Reagan, Bush, Clinton, anybody. This is, for the first time in American history, a sitting American president who lost, refused to give up power, and tried to overturn an American election. If you don't do something about that, you normalize it, and it's going to happen again.
No, you're absolutely right. And that's why I'm calling on Merrick Garland to do your freaking job.
Yes.
Anyway, Joe, I appreciate the time. As always, love the energy. Always great talking with you. I hope you'll come back again real soon.
Rick Smith. Thanks, man.
Good stuff. Our good friend Joe Walsh. Make sure you check out his podcast, the F Silence Podcast. We'll get links out on social media. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1894. That was the day that federal troops pushed Kelly's Industrial Army out of Washington, D.C. and across the Potomac River. The Army was a group of unemployed men who had come to the nation's capital to protest government inaction. The country was in the grip of an economic depression. The nation's agricultural regions in the South and Great Plains were also hit by a drought. Times were hard for American workers and families. The call had gone out across the nation for the unemployed to make their way to the doorstep of Congress. The goal was to petition for public infrastructure projects to put people back to work. Businessman Jacob Coxey had organized a March of the Unemployed from Ohio. Charles T. Kelly and his group came from California. They rode the rails and made it to Des Moines, Iowa, where they encamped. After a while, the local residents decided the unemployed group had outstayed their welcome. The Iowans provided lumber so the industrial army could build flatboats and be on their way. By the time Charles Kelly and his men made it to D.C., Coxey had already been sentenced to 20 days in jail for trespassing on the Capitol lawn. Yet unemployed men from across the country kept coming into the nation's capital. 1,200 men arrived from different points across the country. One of those in Kelly's group was a young author by the name of Jack London. London wrote of his experience, quote, "Across the wild and woolly West, clear from California, General Kelly and his heroes captured trains. But they fell down when they crossed the Missouri and went up against the effete East. The marchers' protests earned no help from Congress." Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So no real surprise there that Joe Walsh would be against the big spending bill, which I think we desperately need. We need to shore up the social safety net that's been under attack for the last several decades. We need to help our seniors. We need to help in so many areas. But good to talk with Joe. Anyway, lots to get to on this infrastructure bill. How are we going to get this through? How's Joe Biden going to be able to keep the Democrats together? So far, everybody on the same page. And I think that has all the credit to this administration and to Biden for knowing how to maneuver to this point. But here to share some thoughts on how maybe we get it across the goal line, I've asked Bill Scher to come talk with us. Bill's a contributing editor over at Politico magazine. Also does a ton of work on his own at BillScherMedia.com. Bill, thanks for taking time for us.
Great to be with you. Also note, I'm also contributing now at the Washington Monthly.
Okay, I'm going to make a note of that because I always love your stuff, and I hope people will take a look at it, and we'll get links out on that as well. So let's go with the infrastructure thing. Surprised where we are? Surprised we've gotten to this point?
You know, I'm not. You know, I've said on a couple of shows going back a few months now that I thought it had a 60 to 70% chance of passing. And people would always, raise their eyebrows and saying, "Really? You're that optimistic?" I mean, so I wasn't making a flat prediction, and we're not all the way there yet. But I always felt, just by looking at what people were actually saying, that there were a considerable number of Republicans in the Senate that want to do this. And it may not be because they're saints. It may be because they want to try to restrain the rest of the Democratic agenda. It may be because they want to get the obstructionist label off their back so they can feel freer to obstruct other things without getting called that. But McConnell was always saying, fairly positive things about it. And, a lot of people assumed that was another Lucy in the football trick. But McConnell front stabs you. He's not a backstabber. He's a front stabber. So I feel like he tells you where he stands. And when he was saying, look, I'm open to this, my attitude was, I think he's open to this. And here we are.
Yeah. And I think because he knows he's going to get a lot of stuff to take back to Kentucky. And this is the thing that Biden has done that the former guy would have never done. You look at a lot of the investments they're talking about could have overly, benefit rural communities and what would be considered, red states.
I mean, one of the dynamics here is that Republicans knew if they didn't cooperate, Democrats could do it anyway. There is the reconciliation escape valve that lets you circumvent the filibuster. So that was a helpful tool to say for Republicans to conclude, better I get a piece of this and shape it and get some credit for it than allowing the Democrats to get credit for everything.
Yeah, but the Republicans would have taken credit for it anyway. I mean, how many did you see walking around saying, be glad we got you this money from the last rescue plan?
I always heard people, I'd make that point. I would get that counter all the time. And look, I'm sure they would try, but it's not the easiest thing to do to take credit for the thing that you literally did not vote for. And this whole way, Republicans have never had any kind of message strategy to undermine support for it. They haven't tried to make an argument that this is ideologically, philosophically bad. Now, they want to say other things that Democrats want to do in reconciliation are bad. But when it comes to roads, bridges, water, broadband, they haven't complained about that. They want to do it, want to get the credit for it. They may want to stop there, not do anything else, but they were willing to do that much.
No, and this is where, in the last segment, I talked with Joe Walsh, and he said he would have voted for the bipartisan bill overwhelmingly, just not this big bloated one that's going to add to our debt and our deficit. And look, I care about our national debt, just like I care about my personal debt, but I also understand good investment. We need sound policy, and we need to invest in the future. And I worry about what I'm going to leave my kids and their kids down the road as our legacy, and what is going to help us move forward as a nation. And this kind of investment seems sane to me.
Both the
Both of them.
Traditional infrastructure and the broader, human infrastructure
Correct.
package. Now, mind you, what Democrats are talking about with the bigger 3.5 trillion reconciliation bill, this is not being sold as deficit spending. This is not being sold as don't worry about balancing the budget. Don't worry about interest rates. Don't worry about inflation. It's all going to work out in the end. They're saying they're going to pay for it. Joe Manchin is saying, I'm going to make you pay for it. But whatever we do, I'm going to make sure that we raise the revenue to cover the spending. So, not everybody understands the economics of this. And I certainly get that there is an emotional gut reaction to inflation that people will get worried about, and Republicans may use to their advantage here. But what's being discussed here is not intended to be inflationary. It's meant to be paid for. When you pay for it, it's not inflationary.
Right.
And now the challenges are going to be for Democrats to craft both prongs, both the spending and the revenue, that creates enough consensus to actually get it over the finish line.
And what do you think the chances are that are? I mean, you've still got a large number of conservative or moderate Democrats that I'm not sure that they're going to go for what the bigger plan is.
I mean, I don't think we're going to land on 3.5 trillion. You got to read tea leaves. You got to go a little bit under the surface with politicians' comments. But my general attitude is, if someone makes an unequivocal statement, I tend to take it at face value. So when Senator Sinema says, I am not going to vote for 3.5 trillion, I take that at its face value. Now, maybe she'll do 3.4. Maybe she'll do 3.1. I don't know how far lower she will go, but I think we'll be lower than 3.5. And so will they pass something? I believe yes. What that something is, I think we got a long way to go.
Yeah.
I mean, keep in mind here, this package as it is envisioned, I don't think we have ever had a bill like this ever. I mean, FDR didn't jam everything into one bill. LBJ didn't jam everything into one bill. This is intended to go across a very wide array of areas. It's preschool, it's community college, it's elder care, it's climate, it's immigration. It's a lot of things.
It's labor.
A lot of labor. It's a lot of controversial areas, and it's in one sense too big to fail. Democrats have to pass something. They can't just belly flop on this. But there's lots of places where it might get cut down because any one or small group of politicians could say, look, I'm just not there on that one. You haven't done the spade work to get the public behind X, Y, or Z, and therefore I'm worried it's not in my best interest. So there's a lot of work to do to make sure that there's actual concrete public support behind all the various areas. The top line seems to be fine. Right now it's in an okay shape. When Fox News poll just had over 50% for 3.5 trillion. So it's not triggering a visceral negative response, but we got many, many weeks and months of debate. I guarantee something's going to crop up that's going to be controversial, and it's going to make things tricky.
Yeah, it always does. But like you said, they have to get something, because if they don't, they get slaughtered next year. And look, I think they may lose next year anyway, but without this, I think they get slaughtered.
Well, and that's part of the driving force here. I think there is a pessimism that they're going to lose the midterms because the president's party usually loses the midterms. It's not that they're, a bunch of Keystone Cops. I mean, it's literally 33 out of 36 midterms that the president's party loses seats, and they only got a few seats they can cough up to keep the majorities. So there's that sense of urgency. We got to get everything done that we can possibly get done. And you have to hope that isn't biting off more than you can chew, because it means defending a lot of disparate elements. I mean, right now, quite frankly, when Biden started, it was American Jobs Plan, American Families Plan. There was a rhetorical framework that explained the general idea of what they wanted to do. At this moment, I think that's been kind of lost. I don't think people really know what 3.5 trillion reconciliation bill actually is right now, because they're starting to jam a lot of things into it for these obvious, understandable political reasons. But I do think at some point they got to get back to telling the story about it. How is it going to help people in total? And that's tough to do when you're negotiating amongst yourselves. When there isn't full consensus, and there's still a lot of jockeying between progressives and moderates, what's actually going to be in this thing.
And what is each of the bills as well? I mean, because the bipartisan one is strictly the nuts and bolts stuff, as where the bigger bill is going to be a lot of the human touch stuff that has been neglected and really attacked for the last 40 years. So I'm looking at this as kind of like a 40-year reset. Hitting that reset button and trying to undo some of the damage of the last 40 years.
And that's big. I mean, this is a really sweeping overhaul of the social contract. So if they can do it, it's pretty historic. And so in one sense, there's a part of you that's like, hey, shoot the moon guy, go for it, go big or go home. And there's another part saying, I hope you really thought this through, because you literally can't think of an historical example of how something like this got accomplished. It's a lot to take on at one time.
No, and this is where I go back and look. Joe Biden wasn't my first choice, but I'm very happy with him to this point. He on the labor front, he's done a lot of things I'm happy with, and pushing this through. This is a lot more than I thought. I was expecting Obama 3.0. Half measures, reaching out, getting beaten with the olive branch, that kind of stuff. He's proven to be a much better, leader than I expected.
Well, he's setting a high bar for himself right now, but we don't know where we're going to land.
No. I mean, to this point, look, he's further ahead than I ever imagined he was going to get at this point. I'm hoping we get through it. I'm hoping that on the other side, but to this moment in time, he's further than I ever imagined he would go.
And I think with Obama, they entered in with crisis, with economic crisis. And while you can look at hindsight and say, hey, your recovery package should have been bigger than it was, at the time, it was getting higher and higher and higher, and then got scaled back a bit by the Democratic moderates in the Senate. And you saw they were kind of around $850 billion, they ended up like 787. But it was a pretty giant dose of stimulus at a critical time. And it didn't make everything become magically better overnight, but it sure as hell stopped the free fall. And it worked. He wouldn't have got reelected if it didn't work.
Yeah, and it worked. I mean, at the end of the day, it worked. And I was arguing at the time it should have been much bigger and much chunkier and all of that, because I wanted to see that priming of the pump, that massive shock to the system. And we didn't get it, but it still worked. And I argue it would have worked a little bit faster and a little bit better had it been chunkier. And I think that was the lesson that Biden and this administration, I think, learned from that.
Well, that package, it was largely crisis oriented. Some elements that had a longer range vision. They're trying to move the ball forward on green energy, for example, but they couldn't get all the way with a bona fide, carbon cap overhaul. What Biden's talking about here, he did his crisis bill. He did the rescue plan, and that was almost strictly short-term focused. And now he's separating a different bill. It's intended to be a 10-year plan, which Obama didn't try something with that kind of range. I mean, there was an American Jobs Act that he proposed that went nowhere. So he did try that, but just couldn't get his own party behind it, let alone the Republicans. Biden's trying something far grander than Obama tried to do, or really, I think anybody has tried to do in one single package.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hopeful. Because we need it, and we need that reset. I'm hopeful. Where do you see the main obstacles? Is it Simina? Is it Manchin? Or do you see someone coming out of nowhere and being the obstacle?
Well, we got to get in the House. So there's this dance around the sequencing. When do we pass one or both bills? And you have the progressive faction led by AOC saying no bipartisan infrastructure bill until we do reconciliation. And there's some murmuring on the moderate side saying, hey, maybe we're not going to do reconciliation until you do the bipartisan bill. And we don't know if either faction's really going to throw their weight around. Neither side has made really clear what their numbers are and how serious that threat is going to be. And we don't know how many Republicans are going to come on board for the bipartisan bill, which also complicates how many people do you need to upset the apple cart? You don't really know. I mean, if 4 Democrats defect on a party line vote, you don't get a majority. But if Republicans come in on something, the math changes. So if, and it's a big if, I don't have evidence they're going to do this yet, if you had 4 moderates who said, look, we're not even going to pass the budget resolution, again, to the parliamentary weeds here, you got to do the resolution before you do the reconciliation. That's if you want to, if you want to go around the filibuster, you got to go through this cumbersome process, and the resolution comes first. If the moderates say, look, I'm not even going to do the resolution until you do the bipartisan bill, that really grinds everything to a halt. And Pelosi right now has been tilting towards the squad side of things, saying we're going to do both at the same time. But if you can't move the resolution at all, I think that math changes.
Yeah. So I know you're not a wizard or looking into a crystal ball, but where are you putting your money if you were? Do we get one, the other? Do we get both? Do we get nothing?
I think we'll get both. I think the journey to getting both is going to be very rocky. So that, just like with, when I was saying, look, I'm optimistic about bipartisan infrastructure, every time there was a setback, everyone would jump down my throat saying, you see, it's going to fall apart. It's going to fall apart. And I'm like, you know what? Look at the broader dynamics here. There's people that don't want it to fall apart. So we're going to get over these obstacles. Democrats want this to work. So I think they will get over the obstacles, but there are obstacles. There is not full, clear consensus on what they can agree on, and it's going to take some time to get there.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how these next couple of weeks play out. And when do you think this is going to wrap up? Sometime August? Sometime October, November?
Well, I'll tell you this: the child tax credit expansion, the checks that parents are getting in the mail right now, they expire at the end of the year.
Right.
Democrats don't want those to expire. So at the barest minimum, there's incentive to get this done by the end of the year. And some of the surface transportation stuff, I think some of that stuff expires at the end of September. And you have the debt ceiling issue mixed into all this, which is also going to hit around the fall too. So I would think we're going to solve this in the fall. But again, because you're trying to do so much at once, it is a really compressed timetable.
Yeah, I personally think we should have been getting it done sooner because we need the time for the political end of this, but it's got to get done. Bill, I appreciate the time. As always, great insight. I like the way you think. Hope people will check out your website, billschermedia.com, to check out all of his writings. He's a contributing editor over at Politico magazine and the Washington Monthly, right?
Yeah, as well as Real Clear Politics.
And you're just everywhere. And I appreciate you taking time for us. Thanks so much.
Media empire.
Good stuff, Bill. Thanks so much. Bill Scher. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2013. That was the day a somewhat unexpected new union formed in Bangor, Maine. Local 207, the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, represents lobster fishermen. Lobster fishermen are known for being fiercely independent, so it surprised many when some started talking union. One of those to bring up the early idea of forming a union was Magnus Lane, a fisherman originally from Iceland. There was cause for concern in the Maine lobster industry that year. A glut of lobsters had driven prices down to a 40-year low. At the same time, fuel and bait prices continued to rise. More than 100 lobstermen and women attended that first meeting. They elected officers and settled on bylaws. In a television interview, newly elected local president Rocky Ally explained, "We're the ones who catch the lobster. We should be able to control the price." Over the next year, membership grew to 600 members from up and down the Maine coast. A year after the union was founded, boat captain Julie Eaton explained the importance of the new union in a newspaper interview. She said, "For the first time, we feel like we have a voice. For the first time, we feel hope that we can protect our way of life." While some lobster fishermen support the union, others have organized against unionization. But the union has been able to win some legislative protections. For example, they were able to ensure that lobster fishermen can keep their fishing license while on active military duty. This union continues to chart new waters in the fight for working people in Maine. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
At a recent congressional hearing on America's so-called labor shortage, mega banker Jamie Dimon of J.P. Morgan Chase offered this insight. People actually have a lot of money, and they don't particularly feel like going back to work. Jamie, most people are living paycheck to paycheck. And since COVID-19 hit, millions have lost their jobs, savings, and even homes. So they're not exactly lollygagging around the house counting their cash. Instead of listening to the uber-rich class ignorance of Dimon, who pocketed $35 million in pay last year, Congress ought to be listening to actual workers explain why they're not rushing back to the jobs being offered by restaurant chains and such. They would point out that there's no labor shortage, there's a wage shortage. More fundamentally, there's a fairness shortage. It was not lost on restaurant workers, for example, that while millions of them were jobless last year, their corporate CEOs were grabbing millions, buying yachts, and living large. Yet, more than half of laid-off restaurant workers couldn't even get unemployment benefits because their wages had been too low to qualify. Then, there's the high risk of COVID exposure for restaurant employees, an appalling level of sexual harassment in their workplace, and demeaning treatment from abusive bosses and customers. No surprise, then, that more than half of employees said in a recent survey that they're not going back to those jobs. After all, even a dog knows the difference between being stumbled over and being kicked. To get the workers they need, corporate giants should try the free enterprise solution right at their fingertips. Raise pay, improve conditions, and show respect. Create a place where people want to work. This is Jim Hightower saying, for a straightforward view from workers themselves, go to the advocacy group onefairwage.site. The Hightower Radio Lowdown is made possible by you lowdowners who subscribe to our monthly newsletter, The Hightower Lowdown. You know who you are. Thank you.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So the more I'm hearing about this secret, this hearing behind closed doors with the former acting attorney general who laid it out. You know, I mean, what we're finding out is there was a coup attempt. Donald Trump was behind it. He attempted to overthrow our elections and had everything in place. And what's scary to me, and this is the weird part, is that a good portion of the country okay with it. And it reminded me going back to, when I was a kid, I had some friends whose grandparents had come from the old country. They were Germans from the old country. And, when you asked them, how could that happen? How could you? They just said it just did. And people came along, and it was a creeping thing. It didn't happen overnight. It was a process. Are we in the middle of that process? Anyway, here to share some thoughts on, well, could we see that kind of insanity here, or are we living through it now? I've asked Harvey Kaye to come talk with us. Harvey's an author and professor of democracy at the University of Wisconsin, Green Bay. His books, Tom Paine and the Promise of America, The Fight for Four Freedoms, Take Hold of Our History, and FDR on Democracy, all available at Powell's Books. Harvey, thanks for taking time for us.
It's a pleasure. Always great to talk to you, Rick. Always.
So, I think back to some of the as I said, some of the people that I've known years ago who, they grew up during the years of the rise of the Third Reich and the rise of, fascism. And, they never had an answer of how it happened. I'm looking at what's going on now, and I'm questioning, are we living through the potential of something like that? Because I know people were perfectly okay with Trump getting away with attempting to overthrow our election.
Well, it struck me even on the day, leading up to that day of January 6th, that something clearly was in the making. And look, I mean, whether we call Trump a wannabe fascist, a wannabe Mussolini, a wannabe Juan Perón, whatever it is, his commitment to democracy was not just limited. He was from the beginning, he revealed his antithetical views. I mean, think about the fact of who he embraced in foreign policy, right? Erdogan in Turkey, Duarte, is that how you pronounce it? Duarte in the Philippines. I mean, if you were a dictator of a country that he might otherwise use the S word to describe, and he embraced you, not to mention his eagerness to spend time with Kim Jong-un, and the love letters they wrote each other. That's right. Yeah. I mean, what were we to make of that? And I haven't even mentioned the P word, Putin, right? I mean, he probably admired Putin's capacity to sustain himself in power and do so by making sure the Russians were in some fashion cowed or, basically marginal to any kind of real public discourse. And he knocked off opponents. Now, one thing everyone should appreciate is this: the creeping authoritarianism did not begin during the Trump administration. It actually goes back 45 years. All the things that you and I talked about for years regarding the effort to smash labor unions, to reduce the legacy of the New Deal, whether it had to do with social welfare programs or the rights of workers, the legacy of the Great Society years, the voting rights, the Civil Rights Act. I mean, all of these have been under siege for a good 45, maybe even we could say 50 years. And I know that sounds so long that how can I make a theory out of this? Well, the point is, think about it. In the course of all those decades, we saw workers' rights under siege. We saw women's rights under siege. We saw voting rights under siege. And by the way, it isn't only conservatives. I don't want to upset the Democrats who probably make up most of our audience, but the fact is that it isn't only the Republicans who were involved in that. It was also corporate neoliberal Democrats who rode the wave. And so at a certain point, you can imagine, inequality is growing. Ever since the early 1970s, the working class hasn't seen a rise in its real wages and living standards. If you add to that the fact that you had these prominent figures stripping workers of rights, let's not forget the USA Patriot Act, only had one no vote, right? And that was the no vote of Russ Feingold from Wisconsin. And I guess it was Daschle who was the majority leader at the time. He was going after Feingold in the Senate cloakroom, trying to get him to come out and vote in favor of the USA Patriot Act, which, involved investigations of Americans checking on the books that people were taking out of libraries, a whole host of things. So we've seen this over and over again. And to what extent? Look, I mean, the Clinton administration never really consulted Americans on trade acts. They didn't consult Americans on healthcare initiatives. My point is this: decade upon decade upon decade, Americans saw their incomes stagnate, the vast majority of working people. They saw billionaires emerge. I mean, when I was younger, I couldn't even imagine the word billionaire describing someone, okay?
And now we've got 1,000 of them.
Yeah. Wow. Pretty good. That's the kind of thing they used to brag about. We have 1,000 billionaires in America. They used to talk about how many millionaires we had in America. So anyhow, we had all of this anger regarding the state of America and where it was going. I won't deny my candidate 2 times around was Bernie Sanders, but I think we would have had a different trajectory if he had won. And the fact is that Americans were looking for change, radical change. And there were those who wanted to do it democratically and those who just wanted to see some strong guy come in and slap around the corporate class, slap around the liberals. You know who I'm referring to. They wanted somebody like Donald Trump. Not to mention he fanned the flames of division in this country. And by the way, let's face it, authoritarianism can thrive when you start dividing the people amongst themselves. When people see each other not as fellow citizens, but in some kind of identity politics that they don't like, then, this was on and on and on. So now what have we got? Well, we have a Biden administration that is struggling to get a major couple of infrastructure plans through, finds itself literally incapable of getting a Voting Rights Act passed, incapable of getting the PRO Act for workers enacted. I mean, we're really confronting a situation which is really ripe for authoritarianism. And in that regard, I'll add one other thing. All of these initiatives around the country, in this instance by Republicans, who are doing everything in their power to disempower citizens, to make it difficult to vote, to literally make it nearly impossible in some counties to vote. What does this imply? It implies an antipathy to democracy. And what's the alternative to democracy? Authoritarianism. Right?
Yeah, but they got the Karens out there at those school board meetings exercising their democracy because they don't want their kids wearing masks, Harvey.
Oh yeah, the mask. I used to avoid any kind of sort of social psychological analysis of America or any people, but you get to the point where you have to wonder what kind of mental health disease are we all suffering? I want to read you a quote from Franklin Roosevelt in 1938, keeping in mind that fascism was on the rise, both in the East, in East Asia, and decidedly so in Central Europe. Nazi Germany, fascist Italy, and the Civil War in Spain, which ended up in a phalangist, essentially a fascist victory. And Roosevelt, in 1938, on the eve of the midterm elections, gave a speech on radio, and he said this very interesting paragraph, and I have to read it. As of today, he said, fascism and communism and old line Tory republicanism are not threats to the continuation of our form of government. But I venture the challenging statement that if American democracy ceases to move forward as a living force, seeking day and night by peaceful means to better the lot of our citizens, then fascism and communism, aided unconsciously perhaps by old line Tory republicanism, will grow in strength in our land. Now that's a description of the last few decades of America.
Absolutely.
So, right? So Americans felt that, that neither party really had the interests of working people in mind and in their hearts. And we've now gotten to the situation where the Republican Party has become a decidedly, white nationalist in many ways, decidedly antithetical to democracy kind of political party. And the Democrats are not yet unified enough to take advantage of their hold on Congress to make laws, new laws, that would enhance the chances of democracy. Look, we're in trouble, serious trouble. I realize we're better off now than we might have been a couple of years ago because under Trump, but seriously, in the face of the pandemic, in the face of how many voted for Trump? 70 million?
Yeah.
Okay, the vast majority of whom, they support the Democratic ideals, the Democratic Party's ideals, but they sure as hell seem to want to bring back, if not Trump, then another Republican who will pursue a similar agenda, maybe a smarter, better, kind of guy. And I mentioned to you a number of times, Josh Hawley.
Yeah, I
The
don't think
senator
he's
from
charismatic
Missouri.
enough to be able to pick up where Trump left off. I think, like Trump, don't like him. There's a charisma about him. There's a used car salesman kind of instinct about him that he knows what people want and need to hear, and he feeds the red meat. Because look,
But Hawley is better looking than Trump.
yeah, but I've seen him speak. I'm not impressed.
Okay, good. Because I've only seen him do interviews. I've never seen him give a public address.
Yeah, I'm again, I fear the normalization of what Trump brought us. I fear that kind of we're okay with overturning elections as long as our side wins, and I'm not in favor of that on either side. But this week, and I wanted to go back to what you said a minute ago about the fact that you've got people who are struggling. The fact of the matter is, in the Economic Policy Institute just came out with this new analysis that said from 1978 to 2020, our CEO class saw their pay rise over 1,300%, while the average working class person barely 18%. And you go right there. We're in this moment where for 40 plus years, you've got people who are stagnant and declining wages and struggling to make ends meet. And nobody in our political class has really tried to help them. And I'm looking at what Biden's trying to do now, and I'm going, it's about time. We need to do something big and make big investments.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And in fact, well, there are two things we need if we think about the records of the past. Number one, we definitely need public investment, right? And here's one of my fears. I love telling you my fears. Okay. You're like my therapist.
All right.
I never had a therapist. You'll be my therapist.
I'm okay with that.
Okay. So my fear is this. If you look closely at the bill that just made its way through the Senate, this is the $1 trillion bill they're calling it.
Right. The
for
bipartisan
infrastructure. So, the roads and the bridges and so on. The fact is that there were things taken out of Biden administration's original proposal that make this a potentially a major gift to the big telecom companies. So let me give you an example of what I mean. So back in the 1930s, when Roosevelt and the Democrats and the New Deals were pursuing the initiatives of the New Deal, among the most significant initiatives was the Rural Electrification Agency. And what they did is they said, look, throughout the South and good parts of the country, power companies are unwilling to provide electric lines and electric power to farmers.
Right.
Okay, in the rural areas were being neglected. Why were they unwilling? Because they didn't think it would be profitable enough. So the Roosevelt administration launched the Rural Electrification Agency to encourage and to help create cooperatives. They created 400 electric cooperatives around the country. Several 100,000 farmers, for the first time ever, had electric power in their homes and barns. Okay, I mean, and it was incredible. Now, what have we got this time? This major infrastructure plan, which is supposed to provide broadband access for rural citizens in rural areas, is not going to be pursued as a public initiative. It will be pursued through contracts, through grants that will then be issued, I believe, by states to companies. What they did is the companies lobbied so effectively, they removed from the bill that made its way through the Senate the possibility of cooperatives and municipalities themselves undertaking these initiatives. And I can tell you in these many years, I think it's as many as 24 states that passed laws forbidding such initiatives. This act would have lifted those laws in favor of allowing cooperatives and municipalities to take charge of the broadband access. So what's going to happen? Well, maybe Comcast, Spectrum, and a whole host of other corporations already have monopoly control in so many areas. They'll be given huge sums of money to pursue this, and there'll be no competition when it comes to that kind of access. I mean, that's just a worry I have.
Right.
And what I'm getting at is when the trucks go in to do the work, they'll have the corporate names on the side, and it won't say, this is your government at work, but rather, this is Comcast or someone else. And Americans will not get the feeling that government can be empowering, that government is a good and not necessarily an imposition. That's one of my fears.
No, that's an excellent
right
point.
now.
And it's like anything, the devil in the details, and how this rolls out. Now, we do desperately need broadband access in rural communities.
Absolutely.
And, we desperately need that kind of investment.
Right, which is why it would be hard to deny the importance of this bill. It's just the tragedy is the corporate lobbyists just get their hands on these things. And, you know, the Biden administration was supposed to be the new Brandeis moment. Okay, the appointment of an assistant attorney general, was it Josh? I blanked on his name. Katner, is it? And then over in the Federal Trade Commission, it's Lena Khan. They were supposed. They're the ones who didn't believe there ought to be this kind of corporate monopoly over so many sectors of our economy. But meanwhile, the bill that's going through, it's as if those folks had no say in the making of it.
It's something that, again, there's something we should be lobbying for, don't you think?
Yes. Citizens lobbying. That's right. And there are folks who've been trying to do that, but it's, you know, we're up against incredible power. If we have 1,000 billionaires, and how many, think about Amazon and think about Google and think about these corporations that they've literally at one and the same time become powerhouses in the economy and literally dominant forces in civil society, because so much conversation, for example, takes place by way of Facebook and Twitter and so on. Is that a public space or is it a private space? That's the old question of democracy. Are you going to have a civil society, or is it going to be a corporate dominated or state dominated civil society?
Well, I mean, if you look at the definition of fascism, you know, it's the bundling of sticks. It's the bringing together of corporate and government interests. The trains run on time. There's profit to be made.
Wait a second. We don't even have trains to run on time in this country.
Probably a bad analogy for that. You're right. But this
did I hear laughter in the background there?
After this, maybe we get that. Maybe that happens. But I do want to come back for a minute, because you brought up Josh Hawley's name a moment ago. That there's this this Love America Act or whatever it is that he's promoted.
Yeah, right.
That is basically saying that we have to teach our kids to recite certain things. I think it's the Pledge of Allegiance in first grade, the Constitution in fourth grade, the preamble in fourth grade. By eighth grade, read the Declaration of Independence and recite the preamble. And 10th grade, identify the Bill of Rights. Why is that a bad idea? I mean, on its face, I'm looking at it and I'm going, it's all stuff that I learned.
Not a bad idea at all, though it's hard for me to believe fourth graders can make their way through the U.S. Constitution. But that's a pedagogical question. It's not a bad idea at all. I actually think it's great. And here's another example where the conservatives are out ahead of the progressives on these kinds of things. But then if you read the next element in it, is that any school that links these documents to some kind of history of racism in America will lose its federal funding. That's the punchline of the act, right? So and by the way, somebody said to me today, well, what about special education schools? What about schools where it would be impossible to accomplish those kinds of things? I mean, are they going to be included or excluded? This is a simple act that's literally, this is an act in its own way of educational authoritarianism.
Right. But what this for me does is, and you're right, the next part of the act says, would make schools ineligible for federal funding if they teach that the Declaration of Independence, Constitution, or Pledge of Allegiance are the product of white supremacy or racism. So this is the boogeyman right now. It's that critical thinking thing. We don't want to talk about the history of this country. And look, I want my kids taught actual history. Not some idealized version of it, not some made-up fantasy, actual history.
Yes. Right now, the divide in that debate is a tragic one, okay, but goes along with the politics of our time. So the Republicans see, the conservatives see any kind of discussion of the American story that relates the stories of exploitation and oppression, of racism, of the marginalization of women. These things are somehow going to destroy any sense of patriotism. On the other hand, and I do not subscribe to the 1619 project. Okay, I just don't. But there is no way you can tell the American story honestly without talking about slavery,
right,
without talking about racism, without talking about, for that matter, the antagonism towards immigrants, despite the fact that we claim to be this nation of immigrants. I mean, those things must be included. But fundamentally, what we should never forget is that the American story is a story of struggle, and that in fact we have transcended slavery, we transcended peonage. You know, I mean, and it isn't that we all did it together. It took struggles from the bottom up. I love what is it? Langston Hughes' poem. That should be taught in schools, right? You know that poem, "Let America Be America Again"?
Right.
Let America be America again. Let it be the dream it used to be. But then the punchline really to the whole thing is let America be America again. Let it be the land that has yet to be. I mean, that's the story of those struggles. I every year I was teaching historical perspectives on American democracy. First thing I did is I had my students read that poem and make sense of it.
But this is the thing that gets me. A lot of people go, well, why do you have a problem with this? And because none of the things on there that I have a problem with, until you get to the other part of it, the punchline, as you said.
Yeah.
Now you're going to try and narrow the focus of what education actually is, which is critical thinking and understanding history and contextualizing it. And they're trying to continue to sell this narrative that is quite frankly, I think, dangerous.
Yeah, but that's why I said to you, Josh Hawley, keep an eye on him.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll see. As always, good stuff, Harvey. I appreciate the time. Good conversation. But I'm hoping the Love American Act doesn't pass. If you take that other part out of it, I'd sign on to it. But we'll see where that goes.
I agree with you. So would I.
Just like they did you see the Tuberville thing? Tommy Tuberville came out with this, we're talking about how the Democrats want to defund the police and, how he's got a bill that's going to make sure that we fund the police. And then Cory Booker jumped up and said, thank you for bringing this up because we don't want to defund the police. And they voted like 99-0 to move Tuberville's piece of legislation. So the gotcha moment he was hoping for ended up, not being a gotcha moment.
I don't know whether or not our story these days is tragedy, irony, or comedy.
It's all of the above. That's simple. Harvey, I appreciate the time, man. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Rick. Talk to you soon, I hope.
Good stuff. Harvey Kaye, professor of democracy there at University of Wisconsin, Green Bay. Make sure you check out the books. Thomas Paine and the Promise of America, the Fight for Four Freedoms. Also, Take Hold of Our History and FDR on Democracy. You can get all those over at Powell's Books. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1937. That was the day the International Longshoremen's and Warehousemen's Union was founded, after the victorious strike of 1934 that established the Union Hiring Hall. West Coast Union leaders embarked on an inland campaign to organize the thousands of warehouse workers who handled shipped goods. But West Coast dock workers overwhelmingly chose to join the CIO after it was expelled from the AFL earlier that year. They found that the ILA planned to abandon the warehouse workers they had worked so hard to organize. They also opposed dues assessments to fight the CIO and disagreed with the ILA's hostility to minimum wage laws, Social Security, and unemployment insurance. Radicals like Harry Bridges and others had established themselves not only as workers' leaders, but also led attacks on Jim Crow racism in the ranks and in the industry. The success of the 1934 strike was due in part to the welcoming of blacks into the ranks of the Union. In his book, Workers on the Waterfront, historian Bruce Nelson notes that, quote, the ILWU's well-known opposition to racial discrimination was an important factor in the Union's expansion into Hawaii, not only on the waterfront, but among sugar and pineapple plantation workers. The triumph of the ILWU in Hawaiian agriculture brought about a degree of fraternization across racial lines that few had thought possible. Since then, the Union has beat back numerous Taft-Hartley McCarthy and McCarthy-era attacks. More recently, the ILWU has been in the forefront of broader social justice struggles, leading walkouts and work stoppages for various political causes. Today, it represents close to 60,000 workers, including those locals that initially refused to affiliate. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
It was an interesting conversation. I like Harvey. Harvey's a good guy. Got sidetracked, as I do often when I talk with him, because he's such an interesting person. But, part of where I wanted to go with that is the fact that, Trump has normalized this kind of craziness, the kind of chaotic leadership and, this kind of division and pitting groups against one another and really moving us in a way where you're ripping the country apart. And also, being willing to overthrow an election. I mean, it's clear now. And it's what we were talking about at the beginning, that on January 6th, I was saying this is a coup. This is what's happening. On the 5th, I knew there was going to be violence because the chatter was everywhere. When you have that many people going to the Capitol going, we're going to stop the election from being certified. That was their goal. And if you listen to them at the time, they told us that. Now, we also are now finding out that, Trump was involved. Do I think he's going to be held accountable? I just don't. But who's going to? His underlings. And I'm glad to see today that a federal judge did not throw out the lawsuit from Dominion voting machines against Sidney Powell, Rudy Giuliani, and the My Pillow kook. $1.3 billion each of them, a lawsuit against them for all of the shenanigans and all of the lies and all of the things that they did. This is how I think they're held accountable. I don't think our Justice Department's going to do it. I don't think they'll see the inside of a jail cell, although I think they should. But I do think the civil courts, I do think they're going to see some accountability. Trump's not. He's going to walk away scot-free. At least that's my thought on it. But I'm happy to see that at least somebody will. Also, former criminal justice college professor. I mentioned this earlier. Evidently, he taught some classes at this Sonoma State University. He's been arrested and accused of setting fires around the Dixie Fire in California. And the worst part of this is evidently he was setting the fires behind the people who were trying to put it out so that they wouldn't have an escape route. Which, I was looking at some of the charges that they were talking about filing against him, setting arson and some other stuff, setting fire on public land and that stuff. I'm of the mindset this is attempted murder. He attempted to kill these people by cutting off their exits. This person should never see the light of day. But evidently, the Dixie Fire has grown by more than 5,000 acres since Monday and burned almost 500,000 acres. It's only a quarter contained. But we don't need to do anything about climate change. We just need to get the rakes out. What Trump said, go rake the leaves up off the ground. That'll solve our problems. Sad stuff. Gonna take a quick break. When we come back, our good friend Bob Ney gonna be here to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day. Right back after this.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
I used to say that climate change is serious, certain, and soon, but this is no longer accurate. Now it is very serious, very certain, and now.
New UN climate report called Code Red for Humanity. Dixie Fire in California, now the largest in the United States and largest in state history. Plus, apocalyptic scenes from wildfires around the world demonstrate that climate change is already here.
All of those apocalypses and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
And it is weird to hear news that sounds so genuinely good. It'd be really nice to get more of that once in a while, like no once-in-a-century weather events for the next few hours.
Oh, that would be nice. This is your Green News Report.
Or billionaire goes to space and dies there. You know, something heartwarming.
Okay, Desi Doyen, we knew this report was coming. We knew it was going to be bad. I guess what we didn't know is that it would come out amid all of these disasters going on around the world that seem to underscore this report.
Indeed. Wildfires driven by heat and drought, for example, are erupting across the world. Greece is experiencing its most severe heat wave in 30 years, and that is triggering catastrophic wildfires. Surreal video taken from a ferry showing people fleeing a massive fire engulfing the Greek island of Evia looked like something out of a movie, but it was all too real.
And not just surreal, but terrifying.
Here in the U.S., California's Dixie Fire in northwestern California is now the largest fire in the country and the state's single largest fire in its history. It's already outpaced the massive bootleg fire in Oregon. State officials say the extent of this year's wildfires is nearly double that recorded this time last year. Heat and drought are fueling this wildfire threat and also are threatening the water supply. For the first time in its history, the major hydroelectric power plant at Lake Oroville has been taken offline because water levels have fallen below the minimum necessary to generate power. Against the backdrop of wildfires, catastrophic extreme floods, and deadly record heat waves, the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has published the first part of its sixth assessment report, which will form the cornerstone of climate science for years ahead. It arrives just months before the next major climate negotiations in Glasgow to pressure countries to increase their pledges to cut emissions under the Paris Agreement. Right now, with current commitments, the world is on track to blow way past the agreement's goal of limiting warming to just 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, much less the harder target of meeting the 1.5 degrees Celsius aspirational goal that scientists say offers us the best chance at avoiding catastrophic climate outcomes.
The UN here seems to be saying, great try on that agreement in Paris, but there is no foreseeable way of actually meeting those goals at this time on our current trajectory.
The report summarizes the physical science basis for climate change, synthesizing the findings from more than 14,000 peer-reviewed studies. As expected, its conclusions are grim and show how close the world is to irreversible climate change. As the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres put it in a statement, the report is, quote, a code red for humanity. The alarm bells are deafening and the evidence is irrefutable.
Other than that, no worries.
The top takeaway, as Dr. Amanda Maycock of the University of Leeds told WBUR, is that human activity is warming the planet, and that is affecting every corner of the Earth's land, sea, and air.
It's unequivocal that human influence is the cause of the changes in the climate that we've observed, and also a big update since the last assessment that was in 2013 is that we can now link more concretely many of the extreme events that we're observing around the world, so extreme heat wave events, extreme rainfall events, to the warming that's occurred and human-induced climate change.
Humans have already heated the planet by roughly 1.1 degrees Celsius, or 2 degrees Fahrenheit, over pre-industrial levels. Thanks to deniers and delayers funded by the fossil fuel industry that have blocked action, nations have delayed cutting fossil fuel emissions for so long that we are locked into some 30 years of worsening climate impacts, no matter what the world does. The report also finds that changes are happening more quickly now than even in recent years. For example, the rate of sea level rise has roughly doubled since 2006. Even in the best-case scenario in which the world takes quick and far-reaching climate action, we are still likely to cross the 1.5 degrees Celsius temperature threshold within the next decade or two, at least temporarily. The other takeaway from this report is that there is still a window in which humans can prevent the most harrowing future, that the choices we make today will make a difference if world leaders enact an unprecedented shift away from fossil fuels and make other changes to society at large to cut emissions.
Well, I don't see why they wouldn't.
The bottom line is we do have the tools, and we can bend the curve back in the right direction and avoid long-term, truly catastrophic climate outcomes if we take action.
Good luck to us. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we didn't have the heart to get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So Rand Paul's been booted off of YouTube. No more Rand Paul. But evidently Rand Paul says that no one should follow the CDC guidelines because, according to him, they can't arrest everyone. And I don't know that they're arresting people for not wearing masks. Did I miss the mass roundups? They're just saying you can't come to school or be in certain places. They just shun you out. But I'm missing the arrests. But he's been banned from the YouTubes. And you remember when the most annoying people on the planet were Ron Paul followers? Now his kid has taken over that spot. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day, our good friend, former Ohio Congressman Bob Ney. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, thank you, Rick.
So you got Rand Paul saying no one should follow the CDC guidelines. No one.
Yeah, I'm not a real big fan, though, of throwing people off of YouTube or Twitter.
I'm not either.
Unless they've done something else. I guess I'm to the point where you've got to say something like really, horrible. And the only reason I say this is because I think at some point in time, opinions are going to come out and they're going to start booting people off of, YouTube, and it's going to be like, okay. And then it goes into censorship. So,
yeah, as someone who views myself as a working class liberal, my view is more speech. To me, I want to believe that sanity will rule. But I don't know. Have you been watching some of these school board meetings around the country?
Oh, wow. All I can ask is why would anybody want to run for the school board right now?
I have no idea why you would want that mess.
Run for Congress and you can hide from people and go vote,
But, the behavior in this stuff, I mean, you remember when parents were supposed to be like role models? And you were supposed to teach your kids how to act in public and how to... I'm just literally, going. I see all these zombie Karens running around screaming, but I don't see the kids complaining.
I mean, you can get heated about something. You can argue. You have your right to debate, but I mean, just some of it is just so outrageous now. Well, and the behavior on airlines. I don't know if it's because you have to wear a mask and people are freaking. I don't know, but the behavior on airlines is way out of control.
Oh, it's nuts. Did you see the one where they duct taped the kid to the chair? I am 100% in favor of duct taping loudmouths to the chair.
He is 16 miles is where he lives from where I'm at right now. Yeah, he's one of us here.
You can have him.
I just apologize to Newark, Ohio people. So
you can have him. But I'm looking at that and I'm going, and they put the guy on suspension who did it. And I'm like, that guy should be given like the key to the airplane or something.
Well, I couldn't understand that either. He had every right to duct tape him. He hit at the guy hit it at him. He was screaming. They had every right to duct tape him.
And I love the fact that they duct tape his mouth too.
I know. That was funny.
That was like the icing on the top. It was enough.
I would have given him a pay raise.
Exactly. That's what I said. He should get a day off or something positive out of that.
Right. I hope they're unionized.
They are.
They can step in for him.
And I'm told he'll be fine. He was on paid suspension, so he'll be.
Oh, that's right. They went from suspension with no pay and the union stepped in and they went to suspension with pay.
That's right. That's why you're a union member.
Well, you've got a union.
Somebody to stand up and fight for you. Good stuff. Wyoming. Moving over to Wyoming. Evidently, Wyoming no longer recognizes Liz Cheney as a Republican.
Well, they don't have the ability to take her paycheck or her seat until the next election if they want to be that way. I mean, I understand that, they can say they don't want to, recognize her or whatever they want to do, but it's the GOP leaders. And, if I were her, I just, keep my cool about it and say, look, this is how I feel, and that's it. And then just reach out to voters.
Yeah, and I think she's going to win.
That's all.
I think she's going to be reelected because evidently there are 8 crazy people, crazier than her, all lined up for 2022. And I think they're going to all eat their own, and she's going to come out ahead.
I like that. Eight people crazier than her. That's pretty good.
And and I think she gets back in, and I think that would be poetic justice.
Right, and plus she is a Cheney. It is Wyoming, and the leaders. They'll also take this to the point where they will get her sympathy votes after a point in time. They'll do things to her. They'll say things. It'll get sympathy votes.
Yeah, but I saw that. And I'm like, you got nothing better to do? You do realize we're in the middle of a pandemic, right? And you do realize things are spiking again.
Well, that's another thing. You were talking about the behavior of the school boards, et cetera. And anymore these days, if somebody does something, the next thing you know, somebody is screaming, resign or impeach them. And I'm just talking about for voting a way a person doesn't like. They need to be thrown out or recalled because they didn't vote the way I wanted. Well, a lot of people vote different ways, and constituencies feel different ways about it. I just think some of this is crying wolf.
Entitled, privileged, whiny, complaining, all of that stuff. I mean, I'm watching I'm watching these videos of these zombie Karens who are basically the illegitimate spawn of the Tea Party, yelling and screaming about things that are just insanity. Right. I mean, the one woman, was going on about how she's drenched in the blood of Jesus, and Jesus gave us air so we can have an immune system. And I'm just going, yeah, but he also gave us the ability to make vaccines. Take it, you moron.
Exactly.
I don't know. I'm struggling with humanity right now, Bob.
It's a different world. I was watching the votes today, and I was thinking of your show. We're going to have a lot to talk about for the next 3 months, should I say, before it's all over with.
Oh, it's crazy. 100,000 cops. I guess we voted, the Senate voted for another 100,000 cops on the street for Josh Hawley's bill.
Well, they did, and they're having the voter-rama is what they call it. And, of course, then the Republicans put out all types of votes. And if you look what happened in it now, some with the hiring of the 100,000 cops, then there were votes for that. 36 on the Democratic side also voted to not defund the police. Now it came down to one vote, which, as you know, was Senator Manchin, Democrat from West Virginia. He was the lone Democrat to cross the party line on several of them. He was the lone Democrat to back the preserving of the Hyde Amendment, which deals with abortion and bars federal funding. And then this was a big one, he was also with Senator Tom Cotton's amendment to ban federal funds from promoting critical race theory in school. But is this going to hurt him in West Virginia? No. But obviously it's going to cause a lot of debate within the Democratic circles, as is the votes that were taken, with defunding the police and the cops on the streets.
Oh, now, no, that's I was going to ask you about that because the one to defund the police was 99-0.
Right.
That was the Tommy Tuberville bill, and I think Tommy Tuberville thought, oh boy, I'm going to put this guy. Here's an end around, and he got it kind of shoved back at him because Cory Booker jumped right into the middle of it for kind of a viral moment.
Well, and Cory Booker gave him a love hug at the end. He went over the floor of the Senate and gave him a hug.
But here's the thing, this is where the left's going to have to figure out how they deal with this, because there are some on the far left that want to defund the police and reallocate resources and do those kind of things.
Well, yeah, and there was also a statement, of the advocacy groups made statements how dissatisfied they were, this is unacceptable, etc. Here's what they need to realize. If I was Senator Booker, I would, the advocacy groups want to meet with me, I would say this. Am I for defunding the police? No, I'm not. Do I want to take all the police off the streets? And if you call 911, then 911 says, "Well, let me call a guidance counselor for you." No, we don't want to do that. Now, tweaking the system, reforming the system, using those words, that's what I think Senator Booker and others can answer. And I think if the groups actually look at what they're saying, then I think they can live with it. Now, if they would like to make this the biggest deal on planet Earth, then it's going to cause a lot of dissension. In my opinion, at least, having been around the building for a while, I think that probably Senator Booker and others saved a lot of people by their vote.
No, absolutely. I mean,
saved a lot of people.
I was never on board with the whole defund the police thing.
From the Democrats.
I'm not on board with abolishing the police department. I do think another 100,000 cops on the street. I see trouble on that horizon. I would rather use those resources in better ways to help keep policemen doing things that we want them to do. And then having like you said, counselors and folks doing things that need to assist. But I'm a little leery of another 100,000 police on the streets.
Well, to be frank with you, I'm not sure they can hire 100,000.
That's a good point.
I really don't think it's going to happen. People just aren't as enthused, to go in law enforcement these days. I think for them to scramble. I remember when we had the air marshals, and after 9/11, and we lost, I think, 25 Capitol Hill police who eventually, majority came back and personally met with me and said, "Hey, can we have our job back?" Because all of a sudden, recruiting air marshals wasn't the thing of the day. So every cycle has its selective hiring, and on this one, I'm just not sure it can go out in a rapid way and find 100,000 people.
I don't see it either. But I did find it interesting that Dick Durbin did turn it around on them and say, look, it's great that you're supporting Joe Biden's idea that his cops plan that he passed when he was in the Senate.
Right.
Thanks for coming along.
Right.
As I was thinking about this, going, they fell into that one. But it's going to be interesting.
These battles, Rick, are going to be in the House on these issues.
Yep.
And when the reconciliation package goes, the battle is going to be after September 15th draft of the committees. The real battle is going to be, in the House again, where everybody's going to, try to stake their claim where they want to be on this. And then, of course, and I predict this right out front, as the House adjusts, the Senate accepts. I don't care what the House comes out with. The Senate's going to accept it.
Yeah. No, I think so. I think something has to pass. I'm hoping both of them do. It's not going to be the $3.5 trillion that the reconciliation bill is going to be. It's going to be something less. But got to get both of them.
And look, there's some things in there that the Republicans are going to scream about, and then there's some things in there like the Medicare provisions, which Lieberman took out in the first place and shouldn't have, with the ACA. Dental programs, there's K through 12 programs, child daycare, all kinds of things.
There's tons of
stuff. Then
stuff.
there's going to be some things that people are going to say, and maybe some of those things will be removed, and then people have to decide what they want to do with the bill.
Yep.
And they'll vote for it.
Yeah, well, I hope so. We'll see. We'll see how that plays out.
The majority will.
Finally, wanted to get your thoughts on the big resignation. Should Cuomo have resigned?
Yes. I'm just surprised that it happened as fast right when the impeachment talk came out. I thought, you and I talked on your show, and I thought it was going to take a little bit of time. I thought he'd hang on. Well, he's going to hang on technically for 14 days, but nobody cares. Once you say I'm leaving, then, they give you a break. But I thought he would hang on a little bit more. I think he probably got the notice that, the General Assembly was going to go through with it, and so he just finally quit. And now I can tell you that a lot of strategists on the Democratic side are happy with it. They did not want this to be a battle and hang on till close to the new year.
You don't want to take this into next year, not at all.
Right, not at all. That would not be good.
Yeah, but I think the writing was on the wall when his
Sure.
His top aide, this Melissa Del Roja, when she resigned. I think that was it.
There's the other problem. Been there, done this. I was trying to hang on at the time with the Abramoff scandal, and I was trying to hang on and do our job. And all of a sudden you start to lose people, and guess what? Your job performance, on top of being in agony and in problems, it falls. And he was going to experience that. She would not have been the last person. It would have been like a domino.
Yeah, no, but she was his cover. I mean, she was
sure.
She was his top defender.
Exactly.
So CNN's taking a beating right now because of you've got Chris Cuomo on the air there. You got brother there. Was CNN wrong for keeping Cuomo on the air?
Oh, I think that they were okay because what are they supposed to do? Purge anybody associated with him that knew him or his family or something? Or if he had another sibling that worked somewhere, they're going to fire them?
Yeah, well, the argument was that he was actually advising the campaign and advising him on what to do.
I look at it a little bit different. I think he was advising his brother.
Right.
I don't think he was advising, here's your best politics. I think he probably, I'm just guessing, it's his brother, and he said, hey, this is, what I think you have to do for the benefit of the family, too. It's his brother, and they've got other family members. But if Cuomo had done something shady and was trying to get, he went to the head honcho at CNN and said, hey, let's run some stories to help my brother, that's a whole different world. Then you yank him off. But nobody has said he's done that. Yeah. So just being the brother doesn't, I think, of course, he's not going to carry stories pertaining to his brother. That would be ridiculous. He's not going to do that. So
yeah, and I don't think he did. I think they stopped talking about it altogether.
Right. Yeah, I mean, he shouldn't be dismissed because he's his brother. And again, I think the advice probably was most likely geared towards, personal issues, because people do forget when people in political positions, get into these things or any type of trauma, they have families. I mean, it's not like they're just, they call up their kids and the kids say, well, let me see, Dad, here's how the election would run. People have, personal, emotional issues, and I think probably that's what he had for his brother.
Yeah. I think it's time for him to go. I'm glad he's gone. Now it's time to move on, and it's a distraction we don't have to have.
Right, exactly.
There you go.
It'll be very interesting now to see. You can bet for sure that the new governor will make things run very, very clean, because if she stumbles on that, then she's going to be in trouble. So I think that's going to be number one priority.
And I can guarantee she's not going to get accused of sexual harassment right away.
I don't think so. Right? You said right away.
There you go.
Bob, I caught that.
I appreciate the time. Always great talking with you.
You too. Thank you.
Good stuff. And look, it's a distraction. We got bigger problems. And my hero of the day, I got to throw this out. Arnold Schwarzenegger, former governor of California, back when the Republican Party was somewhat sane. Was not a huge fan of his as a governor. I thought he did not a great job, but probably just as good as Ronald Reagan did when he was governor there. But he evidently argued that his message to the anti-mask crowds is screw your freedoms. He says, because with freedom comes obligations and responsibilities. He said, we cannot just say, I have the right to do X, Y, and Z. When you affect others, that's when it gets serious. And this is kind of the argument that Alan Dershowitz was making on Fox News, saying, look, you have the right to do certain things. You don't have the right to get me sick. And this is kind of where I'm at with this whole school board stuff. And again, I'm so grateful for the school district that I live in that they haven't kowtowed to this, that they haven't, you say, oh, we're going to make it optional. No, you keep people safe. You do the right thing. That seems to be, to me at least, the right decision. I'd love to hear yours, though. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Tell me why you think one way or another. Is Little Precious's breath that bad that they can't wear the mask? I'd love to hear someone tell me that. Because maybe that's all it really is. Maybe that's all it is. And thank goodness for cell phones today. I'll tell you, because the The video footage that I've been watching, and I spent like an hour today just falling down a rabbit hole of Karen crying, these zombie Karens losing their minds over them not getting their way. And it just made me go, wow, what an entitled bunch. What an entitled bunch of poorly educated, really poorly spoken loudmouths. Wow. And to think that's someone's parent. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. Friday, we're going to be off on the program. We will be running one of our top bests of little family time. But be sure you tune in tomorrow. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.